Camera's live.
Thank you. Well, welcome everyone to the Regional Services Committee meeting of March 24th, 2021. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge we're on the traditional territory of the Coast Salish people. And with that, we'll move to the first item on the agenda. Ms. Legault.
The first item is adoption of the agenda, and I believe there were Director Yanni DiNardo had something to add.
Director Yanni DiNardo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a new business item for the closed agenda, Community Charter, Section 90, proposed provision of service. If I could add that to the agenda, please.
Okay, Ms. Legault, do we do that now or at closed?
We should do it now because we have to close the meeting with the appropriate sections.
Okay. Moved by Director Nicholson. Second, Director Stone. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And Director Nicholson.
Thank you. That just reminded me, I have an addition to the closed agenda too, which I spoke to Mr. Farquhar about, but I forgot to ask Legislative Services what the section would be that it would be closed under. It's relating to parkland acquisition.
Okay.
That would be Section 1E.
That would be Section 1E. Thank you.
Would you like to move that, Director Nicholson?
I'd like to move that.
And second, Director Smith. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, any other additions? So, motion to approve the agenda? Or did we do that? No, okay. Director Smith, second, Director Stone. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Ms. Legault.
Item M1, adoption of the Regional Services Committee meeting minutes of February 24th, 2021.
Okay, a recommendation that the minutes of the Regional Service Committee meeting of February 24th, 2021 be adopted. Director Sebring. Second, Director Toporowski. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. And next item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No business arising from the minutes and no participants for public input period. So we will move to delegations, and I will bring in so the first delegation, item D1, Angeli De La Rosa and Kent Mullenix from the Institute for Sustainable Food Systems at Kwantlen Polytechnic University regarding the Organic Sector Extension Service, and this is for information.
Yeah, thank you. And welcome. I see Mr. Molini.
Yes, let me get.
Welcome.
And I do have a PowerPoint to share. May I share my screen?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. Give me 1 second here.
While Angeli is doing that, I will introduce us. So my name is Kent Mullenix. I'm the director of the Institute for Sustainable Food Systems, and Angeli De La Rosa, who is with me today, is a research associate with the Institute. You all may not be familiar with the Institute for Sustainable Food Systems, and so I'd like to just introduce the Institute a bit. We're an applied research and extension unit at Kwantlen Polytechnic University, and our university has 5 campuses on the lower mainland on the unceded and traditional lands of the Kwantlen, Musqueam, Katsi, Semiahmoo, Tsawwassen, Kwakwut, and Coquitlam people. And even though we're based in the lower mainland, we work with communities and partners and organizations around the province because our work is primarily focused on advancing regional food systems and predicated on our philosophy that food systems should be place-based and that they should operate within and in respect to the natural ecosystems where people live and the food is produced. We're a multidisciplinary team because advancing regional food systems requires multidisciplinary work. And ultimately, our objective in advancing regional food systems is to advance the social, economic, and ecological well-being of BC's diverse communities. We have in addition, we have a particular focus on working with Indigenous nations and communities and organizations. But today we're here to talk to you about a project we've undertaken to uh, bring forth an organic extension service across the province. The BC Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Fisheries commissioned us to do this study that we're going to share with you today. And it is, in essence, a feasibility study. We are to establish or reconfirm the need for a coordinated province-wide extension service supporting and advancing the organic sector, and to develop a detailed proposal and plan for that organic extension service to meet the sector's needs now and to grow the sector. To us, extension means integrated applied research, knowledge mobilization, and knowledge tool adoption programming. Extension typically, sorry about that, buzz. Extension typically constitutes non-formal education and learning opportunities and the provision of tools and methods for farmers, for communities, for business, policymakers, and consumers, all to address the challenges they face and to advance goals. So in essence, extension is linked with applied research and takes the knowledge produced from applied research that are focused on real world problems and connects it to the communities and the users of that information to address their challenges. So we're developing this plan for a province-wide organic extension service, and we're now at the stage of speaking with regional governments, and we're doing so because we see that regional governments are generally very interested in advancing and supporting agriculture and advancing regional food systems as a community and economic driver. Ultimately, our goal, in addition to sharing this information with you, is to get your feedback on our concept to date, and hopefully engender your support for this in the form of an endorsement of the idea of bringing forth a province-wide extension service. So with that, I will turn it over to Anjali, who's going to share with you the work that we've done to date and what our thinking is.
Thank you, Kent. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us. I'm just make sure my slides are working here. Okay. As Kent said, we're here to tell you about the project, let you know what we've learned, what our initial thinking is, and to invite the regional district to consider supporting the concept in the form of an endorsement through a letter or a resolution. We had met with members of your planning team and got some good suggestions for the project. And one of their suggestions was to present as a delegation. So I just wanted to say a little bit more about what extension is. You know, Kent said quite a few things about it already. I just wanted to give some examples of what it could look like. You know, extension can look like a lot of different things. It could be workshops, it could be seminars, it could be on-farm demonstrations or farm tours. It could also be mentorship programs, farm incubators, business incubators, and things like videos and fact sheets. And these tools would be developed in collaboration with the people who are using them. And so our goal is to really conceptualize what such a service would need to look like in order to support organic and regenerative agriculture in our province and to move the provincial food system towards greater sustainability and to be more regenerative. And we think that Extension can do that by promoting more widespread understanding and adoption of these practices throughout the food system and really supporting the organic sector to be to grow, to thrive, to be more profitable, and to be more viable. I'm going to skip this slide because I've already spoken about that. I wanted to share just a few things about what we heard when we surveyed and interviewed folks across the province. We heard that extension for the organic sector is lacking. We heard that existing services are piecemeal, uncoordinated. So people are doing things, but they're not really working together as well as we could be. And often the folks who are offering these kinds of services are lacking capacity or lacking funding, and many of them end up being just grant funded projects. They're not very long-term in their approach. People might have trouble using them because of the cost, or perhaps because of the distance, especially for folks who are living outside of the more populated areas in the province. We also heard that there's an interest and a need for support outside of the certified organic community, and there's a need for extension to be more coordinated, more strategic, and more accessible. And so our initial idea for how it could work, we know that our institute won't be able to do this alone. So our initial idea is really quite collaborative for the organizations who are already doing extension work to be more coordinated, to work together under shared strategic priorities. So we think that this could look like regionally, there would be the actual boots on the ground extension providers. We've heard a lot that, the support needs to be regional specific information. We also think that the work of those extension agents and extension providers would be supported by a small management team who would really provide strategic direction and coordination and facilitation of partnerships. We also think that it would be really important to have a steering committee who would then connect with the industry and communities about goals and priorities that should be served by the extension service. We know that we would need administrative and coordination support. And the extension service would be connected to a network of specialists, researchers, and farmers who can provide the expertise on organic agriculture and food within the province, but also folks who around the world who are doing this kind of work. So how can we link all of them together? And the services and programs offered in terms of extension would range from day-to-day support to really looking at longer term, maybe multi-year initiatives to generate more impact in terms of sustainability. The last thing I wanted to talk about was just how organic and regenerative agriculture could support our communities. Agriculture and economic development through extension programs, we really want to support our farms and food businesses to be more profitable, more viable, and more sustainable. Extension can provide not only technical support, so technical support would be like organic pest management, for example, or organic soil best management practices. But extension can also provide things like business management or marketing support or demand side, so consumer education perhaps. So really think that can be a really big impact. Environmental stewardship, organic and regenerative farming promotes the health of our ecosystems, our soil health, our water conservation, biodiversity. What happens on the farm doesn't just stay on the farm. That's related to climate change adaptation and mitigation. Regenerative agriculture is all about rebuilding soil organic matter and restoring biodiversity in the soil. And we know that kind of agriculture needs to be more widely adopted. And that's where extension comes in. We would then help farmers figure out how do you actually make that practice work on your farm. And then food security, we hope that we can, through extension, take the knowledge and tools to make our food system more sustainable and really get them in the hands of more people who want to grow food well, Let's make our regional agriculture and food system more resilient to future shocks, whether that's another pandemic or extreme climate events. And we do hope that Extension can play a part in supporting food security and food sovereignty goals of Indigenous communities on their own terms. We're still in the early stages of figuring this out, and we know we need to speak with Indigenous nations and Indigenous communities about what support would need to look like. We have spoken to the First Nations Agriculture Association about becoming a central partner in Extension, and they have agreed. They've let us know that although most of the producers that they support are not certified organic, they do generally follow organic or are interested in organic and regenerative practices. And so extension support in this regard would be helpful. That's all of the slides that I had. Thank you for listening. And again, we're happy to provide this. We would love your feedback, and we're inviting the regional district to consider supporting us, providing an endorsement for the concept. We'd like to be able to say in our final report, to be able to include endorsements in our final report. We're also open to other ways that the regional district might want to support something like this. For example, if you think that the district might be willing to support through, let's say, in-kind support, like office space or a phone line or a monetary contribution, that could be indicated in the letter as well. We're not actually looking for concrete funding at this time, but just more of an indication of a willingness to support this concept in the future. So thank you very much, and we're really happy to take your questions.
Great, thank you very much, Ms. De La Rosa. If you could take your screen down, we'll see. I'll turn to the committee for questions. I see Director Sebring.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for a very interesting presentation. I've lived in a number of other provinces and states, and the whole notion of agricultural extension in a lot of those jurisdictions is handled by the provincial agriculture ministry, or in the case of the states, the agricultural secretariat, or whatever they call it. How closely are you working with the provincial ag ministry? Because I see this more as I'm not saying we shouldn't be involved, but based on what I see elsewhere. And the extension thing there was everything from the kinds of things you're talking about to they had nutritionists who were teaching young moms how to cook, but it was done through that, what they called it, extension. It was agricultural extension services. So how does that tie into this?
Yes, thank you, Director. We are working very closely with the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Fisheries on this initiative, and they are very supportive of it. They got out of the business of delivering extension extensively years ago, decades ago, in fact, and that to the detriment of the agriculture sector in BC, in my estimation, and in the estimation of many others. They have indicated that they are supportive and that they will be a central player in this, but that we're going to have to come up with a new model for a collaborative extension service. In the United States, extension is largely based at universities and is a local government, university, state government, and federal government partnership. And we're not proposing to replicate that model. It's not going to happen. But we do recognize that a partnership between the provincial government and universities and private and NGO sector organizations are likely what is going to work in BC.
Thank you very much.
Nice. Director Yanni DiNardo next, and then Director Marsh.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your presentation. I really appreciate it. This is something that I'm extremely passionate about. And I just wanted to make a comment that our agricultural minister, like you've spoken to, is very keen and supportive, and especially small towns and communities. And we live in Cowichan Bay itself is a Cheetah Slow community, so that's an international assembly of people that are of the same thought process with local food and food security. And I think that this is a perfect time with our COVID. What's happened with COVID is actually brought people back to being self-sufficient and looking after our soil. So I appreciate your presentation and I wish you success.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Marsh.
Yes, thank you. I echo my colleagues' words and I thank you for your presentation. It's very exciting. I wonder if you're aware of a local organization we have called Cowichan Green Community.
We are not.
Okay, I suggest you
Angela, are you?
contact them. Pardon me?
Oh, I was asking Angela if she was.
No,
Oh.
I knew about the Cheetah Slow community designation, but we hadn't heard of. So I'm just making a note now. So Cowichan Green
Community.
Community.
So they've done an awful lot of similar things, and they've just received a grant from the province of a 1 million, I forget, to create a food processing facility on land that the municipality leases them really cheaply. So they started there. They started way before that, but with us, they started at this piece of land and created a local seed bank. And different growers, even hobbyists like myself, you'd bring plants home and grow for the seeds and bring the seeds back. And the really exciting thing now is they're going to have this basically agricultural hub, which fits with the North Cowichan Climate Action and Energy Plan. And it's going to help the whole valley, and where there will be so value added products in a commercially passed facility. When it'll be built, I can't say that, but Judy Stafford is the executive director, and I think I see Ms. Mayor's Chair Director Sebring just put in the chat their website, but it's just Google Cowichan Green Community and it'll come up.
We are aware of the hubs that are being developed around the province, and it is absolutely likely that extension services, organic extension service, will be very closely linked with these hubs.
Yeah. For instance, they have a tool lending library, and it sounds like you're looking at tools. And so thank you. This is really exciting that it's regenerative and it's organic, and that I really hope that you find the partners you need to fund your funds.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Director Marsh, any further questions or comments? Director Nicholson?
Sorry. Thank you for your presentation. I too am really excited about this. We've really missed extension in the agricultural community for a long time. I used to work in forestry extension and getting that off the ground, and I must say it is a real challenge to build the critical mass for an extension effort, collaborative or otherwise. I think that your focus on growers that are not necessarily certified is really important. And I would certainly think that, I know in my area, I have a lot of agriculture in my community, and I'm a small farmer myself. I know that there is a lot farmers can do to better protect the environment and sort of move to more regenerative practices if they understand, if they were to understand a little bit more about the systems they're working in. Yeah, so I'm really hopeful that you are successful, and all my support's there.
Thank you. Director Toporowski.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for your presentation today. You mentioned Indigenous communities, and I just wanted to know what kind of outreach you have done with the local First Nations in the area here, or if you have yet.
We have not yet. We have been speaking with the First Nations Agriculture Association primarily, and we're going to continue to work with them to reach out to nations and indigenous agriculturists and build that relationship. But we have not yet.
Thank you. Okay, Director Smith.
Thank you. I enjoyed your presentation today. As a vegetable grower and fruit grower on my own half acre, I tend to definitely enjoy anything where people are growing and returning to the earth the ingredients that are required. I'm hoping that you're also involving the Islands Trust as Area G Director. There's 11 islands under Area G. I know that Thetis Island has a very active group that's continuing to work towards sustainability with agriculture and organic recycling. And then I also know that Penelakut tribe is also has a fair amount of agriculture on Penelakut. So those are areas that I think are also very important as we move forward in your project. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Smith. So it looks like that's it for questions. So this item was for information. I appreciate you were looking for an endorsement. I'm wondering if it might be best if this was endorsed by the full board. Looking to Ms. Legault if that's appropriate, but if you could, if it is, I think maybe if you sent a request, a letter to the board, we could certainly look at endorsing this as soon as possible.
Okay, we will do that. And thank you very much for your time and your attention and for your excellent feedback. We appreciate it. The suggestions for moving forward are really valuable to us, as is your affirmation of the concept. I'll leave you with this. We know that this is not going to be easy, and it's not going to happen overnight. But we are dedicated to making it happen, and it will only happen and be effective to the extent that there are committed partners and collaborators and supporters for this. So we're working hard to cultivate that collaboration and those partnerships. And so we thank you for your feedback and attention.
Well, thank you very much. And I think I saw Director Morrison's hand there.
Thank you. I'd move this matter be directed to staff for a report to be presented to the board with the components of their ask to be considered at a future date.
We have a seconder for that. Gianni DiNardo, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, well, thank you very much to both of you for the interesting presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
And Ms. Legault, I believe we have a second delegation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item D2 is Tom Rutherford and Tim Kolchinsky of the Cowichan Watershed Board with the draft 2020 annual report and 2021 business plan presentation.
Very good. I see you both there. Welcome. And I think you have a presentation. Did you want to launch right into that? Or?
You're on mute, Tom.
Cutting out, Tom.
Great. First of all, I'd like to really thank you for the opportunity to be here. And I would also point out, and I should, that Tim has a speaking engagement at 10 o'clock this morning with the Polis Institute. We were thinking we'd be through by then. So Tim, thank you for, I'm just wondering if you still have a couple of minutes and maybe we could shuffle up what we had planned, and you could speak first. Would that work for you, Tim?
Sure. Maybe I'll just keep it short if that works, if that's okay.
Yeah, perfect.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to share a little bit about, well, it's kind of funny, you know, in the sense that we're more than neighbors. We really are part of the same community. We're a part of the valley, and it's, you know, for many years it has been Duncan, you know, and Cowichan, and sort of, you know, and we have so many of these mental kind of distinct boundaries, and it really hit me when I ran into an elderly couple that had just visited New Zealand, and this was not long before COVID, and it kind of struck me. We didn't really have any conversation. They didn't really know anything about me or my background. It was just kind of this random conversation. And it was about their visit to a family friend in New Zealand that happened to be a nurse. And the elderly man had ended up in the hospital just to see to some basic health needs. And they were really shocked when their friend, the nurse, came in and was visiting with them. When the lady went around and started opening all of the windows in the hospital, and they were several floors up. And so the nurse kind of said, you know, it's kind of like now, right? It was quite chilly. And the nurse kind of said that, or the friend asked the nurse why she was opening the windows. It was super cold. And the nurse related that a very well-known Maori elder had just passed, and that it was customary to open all of the windows. And the lady was kind of shocked, and she said, well, why would you care? You're not Maori, you know. I mean, she wasn't trying to be pointed. This was her friend, but she was just kind of surprised. And the nurse just sort of looked over and said, you know, it's just the way that it's done here. And it's just a basic respect. And it went from just sort of being a quaint, you know, a quaint belief to a respect. And, you know, I think there's so much that we don't really get to talk about, you know, here in the valley. And, you know, Cowichan Tribes has over 400 staff. CVRD, you know, is a large body with tons and tons of staff. But we don't really get to talk about the positive things that we do, and, you know, and how all of these little bits and pieces that we don't think about fit together. It was my late grandfather that kind of helped initiate the City of Totems. And at the very beginning, there was kind of a small discussion that wasn't allowed to flesh out. And it was that here in Cowichan, we don't actually build totem poles. We have house posts, and we have kind of a different cultural structure. But lo and behold, right, you know, we've kind of now developed kind of a whole new collective history here in Cowichan. We've brought back elk. We've been bringing back Chinook. The positive things that come out of the relationship, I think, are epitomized by what happens at the Watershed board. And it's so much more than just the funds to build the weir. It has become so much more than just the weir. There's a whole level of resilience. And I just kind of wanted to share that thought because it's, we've been able to do so much with flood planning coming out a couple of months before the big flood that we had in 2009. And all of the sediment management removal that Cowichan Tribes was able to do because of the partnership that we had with the CVRD. And I just kind of wanted to relate that it's hard for us to sometimes see how important that is, and how I'm just heading off to another call because there's a couple hundred people who are really, really interested in what we do and how we do it here in Cowichan. And it's become, I think, kind of just become a natural process. And I just wanted to share that how much we appreciate that, and how, how in many ways we don't realize the rest of the country is watching. And it's such a big positive thing, whether it's communities in Quebec asking what we're doing here and how we do it, or in the St. Lawrence, or I just think we have something special here, and I just wanted to share those thoughts. And my apologies, I should run to the next meeting, and just trying to keep it as short as possible.
Thank you. Thank you, Tim. Very thoughtful remarks, and thanks very much.
Thank you, Tim. So maybe I'll take over. Okay, thanks,
Yes.
Tim. Good luck. And I just ask the chair. I know we have 10 minutes, and I'm not sure. I would like to request that I have 6 or 7 now, just to wrap up. Does that seem okay?
Yes, I believe we're supposed to ask for a formal motion here. See Director Stone, motion to extend. Second, Director Nicholson. All in favor? Opposed? Great. Okay, go ahead. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you. And one of the reasons that I had scheduled Tim to speak after me is he's a hard man to follow when you're speaking. He's so articulate. So we had 2 main objectives today. One is I wanted to speak to you, or I guess provide you with a little bit of a summary of what the board's been up to through the lens of our annual reporting. And then secondly, I had asked Tim to speak to the partnership and the importance of the partnership to our broader community, which he's already done really eloquently. So I'm just going to quickly move through a bit of an update. As you know, we prepare an annual plan and a business plan every year. There are summary documents. The annual plan reviews the progress in the previous year, so 2020, and the business plan is a forward-looking document that looks at what we hope to accomplish in the future. And we present these to our foundational partners and then for ratification to the board. And last year we got comments back, which is great, from everybody. And generally they were saying, this is great, but too much detail. Fewer tables, please. We want something that's readable and accessible. So these are both in your meeting packages, and we have made those changes. So for today, I am not going to go through each one in tedious detail, but I thought I'd pick one highlight from each report and speak really briefly to that. And then I'd be more than happy to answer any questions now or at a later date. And on the last slide, I have my contact information. So please don't hesitate to get in touch with me if you'd like to. So the annual report to 2020, the one thing that I would like to highlight is the real progress we've made collectively on water sustainability in the Cowichan and Cookside watersheds. So in the Cowichan, as you know, and Tim referred to it, we've been working to provide increased spring storage so we can have more sustainable flows in the summer. And some of us have been working on this for literally decades. And in 2020, we've made some real progress working with our partners. One of the things, or one of the ways that the Watershed Board provided leadership is on the fish passage issue, which obviously if you're putting up a structure across the watercourse that supports like anadromous fish, you want to make sure they can get upstream and downstream. So we put together an expert panel and worked really closely with design engineer Matt Woods from Stantec and built in what I'm calling triple resiliency. So 3 fishways that ensure that all species of salmon at all life history phases from fry to adult can move upstream and downstream at all times of the year. So this is pretty innovative. There will be 3 structures, the existing one, a new one through the island in the center of the watercourse, and a new very innovative design on the south bank that will provide also some really great education and awareness, like opportunities as people are able to watch the fish move upstream and downstream. So I'm really proud of leadership role there. We've also worked in the option for a consideration of a large siphon structure to move water from depth downstream in the summer to actually cool off the river when it gets warm. Now, the Cowichan is a different kettle of fish. We don't have this option for a techno fix, for an infrastructure fix. So the Watershed Board is acting as a secretariat and a special advisor to an innovative process in BC, actually the first to look into scoping a water sustainability plan, which is a new tool under the Water Sustainability Act that would provide for some real changes in how we manage water. So one would be the priority would be given to like ecosystem health, which is not done normally. And the second was that the Crown would share the decision-making power. So there would not be unilateral decisions made on land and water use in the watershed. So these are early days, but the province is watching. And I think we have a really good opportunity to show that we can do things differently to ensure a sustainable community and a sustainable watershed. So those would be the highlights for last year. Looking forward, a couple of quick highlights. One, to support like the planning initiative, which I've spoken to on the Cowichan, we need information. There's been no salmon population abundance estimates developed for the Cowichan this century. There's no information on detailed habitat parameters. There's no idea of how much water we need to ensure the sustainability of like salmon and trout. So there's no known relationship, science-based relationship between critical habitat features and water flows. So we recruited $800,000 this year as the first of a 3-year program to like do the science to explore these things and to also include an Indigenous flows component where we do an interview with elders and knowledge keepers.
Excuse me, Tom, you seem to be cutting
how much
out.
water we need. Last point, last slide. Yes. Okay, hang on.
Turn off your video, Tom.
How do I do that with the slide showing? I don't have access to my.
What about if all the
controls.
board turned off their video, Director Stone, Chair Stone?
Yeah, this isn't unusual for us. No offense, Tom, but he's got bandwidth issues, so it usually works when he can turn off his video, but maybe he can't when he's sharing. But I did turn off my video. Just try and speak slowly, Tom, and don't move.
Oh, we've lost him altogether. Oh,
No,
there we go.
I think he might bring the
There we
So
go.
I'm back. So I've shut the slide deck down. But the last point I was making on highlights for the upcoming year is we recruited resources from another of funders to implement a really intensive communications program using Salish, an Indigenous-led comms outfit to profile the work we're doing in all the watersheds and the work that our partners are doing. So be it the tribes, CVRD, NGOs, and produce a number of videos for live streaming on social networks. And I'm really excited about this because so much good work happens in this watershed, led by a number of initiatives and agencies, and we need to get the word out. Last comment on that is, part of this is our 6-foot Chinook mascot, and I'll just make this offer to the board members. If any of you have wondered what it would feel like to be a 6-foot Chinook salmon, you should contact me because I can provide you with an opportunity to have that experience. So with that, I think I'll leave it. My apologies for the bandwidth issue. Once again, thanks to Tim, and thank you very much for the opportunity to share this information, albeit briefly. And I would be more than happy to answer any questions or to come back or speak to you individually if you're really looking for some more information on the work of the Watershed Board.
Okay.
It's up to CM. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you, Tom. And I think we do have some questions. I see Director Wilson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Tom, as well for that presentation. It was really good. I particularly am interested in two things: the salmon protection program, because I'm involved with one down here in Mill Bay where they do a very, very good job with helping the salmon on their way towards Shawnigan and other places. So thank you for doing everything you can on that. One of the other things that really I have a problem with is the water storage. We, as you know, have no real storage apart from Lake Cowichan and maybe Shawnigan Lake as well. And I'm wondering if there are any other plans to try and extend or increase our water storage capacity, because there's an awful lot of runoff that disappears into the ocean. Is there any plans within your organization for looking into that kind of thing?
That's an excellent question. And yes, there is. Briefly, as I said, in the Cook's Island watershed, there's no obvious opportunity, much like other watersheds, be it the Chemainus or Stocking or Holland or the watersheds further south. So using some of the resources that have been made available to us through the Water Sustainability Plan, we've retained a hydrologist, Christina Netherwell, and she is actually right now, as we speak, looking at options for other ways of storage in the Cook's Island that may not be the classic, let's just build a dam, on a lake, but things like, smaller wetland developments, farmers building on-site infrastructure to store water. One of the things that has been done in other areas, I'm a little bit leery, but we're looking into it, is something that's called groundwater recharge. So my understanding of that is actually taking surface water when it's abundant and storing it in the ground and then pumping it out. So there are a number of options. I'm the furthest thing from a hydrologist, but I'd be very, very happy to share that report with the board once it's released.
That's great. Follow up, please, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, that's great. And that's the kind of thing I'm thinking of, because as we, the kind of thing I've been looking at is there are huge caverns, if you like, down there, which can be used for storage, not necessarily up here, but it is going to be, as we know, one of the biggest problems is going to be the supply of fresh water to everybody, and we need to be able to store it away. So that's great. One of the other things which comes up, you'll probably see that last month Victoria bought a huge swatch of land behind their reservoir to protect that area up there. Are you looking at anything like that as far as protecting the watershed's supply lines, if you like, to stop all that runoff that happens if there is a lot of logging or clearances, things like that? Is there any plans to look at the kind of acquisition that might come forward on things like that?
So certainly the best way to make sure that land is protected is to purchase it. And I think CRD is extremely lucky in that they own the watershed that provides all their drinking water. That's not a normal situation, but it's an extremely good one. As you know, there is an opportunity right now, the large piece of land in the Cook's Island watershed that includes Grant Lake. And it's the very back piece of that land that slopes southward that CRD just purchased. And so certainly we would like to encourage and facilitate, if possible, these opportunities when they arise. It's a little bit beyond the fiscal capability of the board right now to purchase land, but I agree with you 100% that it's really worth putting our collective minds to these opportunities as they come up. And there is a great one right now in the Cook's Island watershed.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Tom. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next, I have Director Marsh.
Oh, thank you very much, Tom. And please thank Tim for me. I noticed that you have attracted $30 million in federal and provincial dollars. Is that since we last saw you?
So let me be clear, that is a collective, that's the watershed. The watershed board does not have that money. And the lion's share of that, yes, since I last spoke to you, was through the DMAP grant to Cowichan tribes. So that's a 7-year envelope of resources totaling $24 million for flood and drought interventions. And of course, there are a number of other grants cascading. It's very interesting. I don't want to get off track here, but last year for the Watershed Board, so 2020 was a very skinny year because of COVID, because of a number of things. Fiscally, it was challenging for us. And one of the things I'd like to, I guess, thank you for and point out the importance of, because we did have resources from CVRD, we were able to keep the lights on, keep things running. And in December, there was an opportunity to apply for a number of grants, which we did working over the holidays. And we've recruited over $800,000 in the last few months. And that's because we had that, you know, 1 day a week that we were able to keep at it, thanks to the support from the board, your board. So a lot of this funding stuff is really opportunistic. And last year was a bit skinny. This year we'll be leveraging our base funding by almost 2,000%. So this is a rich year. So, you know, these things tend to come and go, but you need to be ready when the money is ready.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up, Mr. Chair. I remember years ago when you came to us and you were telling us about if we had a function and put money in, we would attract money. And you were right. But it couldn't have happened without your board and the cooperation between you and all of the volunteers, and between the chair of the CVRD and the chief. This is a thing that really moves me, how the community has come together. And in those drought years, watching on Facebook, you people taking buckets of little fries up the river. And I just really want to give you a really heartfelt gratitude, because I think you saw ahead more than, you know, what we're now seeing. I think you saw it way before we started to see it in the terms of drought and, you know, the Cowichan aquifer, et cetera. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Marsh. Director Smith.
Thank you. I always enjoy your presentations, Tom. They're so informative, and I love the documents, reading through them. They're so fascinating because, you know, I feel you and I have had conversations, and you've been at my home meeting with others from sort of the North CVRD. And, you know, of course, we admire the work that's gone on with the Cowichan Watershed Society. And, you know, maybe we're just a little jealous, just a little, you know, but extremely jealous, because we see how dedicated the group is, the amount of work that gets done for minimal wages, and the dedication of volunteers. Those are all so important in working towards the future. I was just wondering, what other groups, I know that you work with the Cowichan tribes and that they work together. I believe there's a group from the Cowichan that's also involved, or is it what other individual groups do you work with through, you know, collecting data, working together, other volunteer organizations? Maybe you could speak to that for me. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much. So within our geographic footprint, right, the Cowichan, Cowichan watersheds, of course, we work really closely with our foundational partners, so Cowichan tribes, CVRD staff. But there are also a number of NGOs and other groups that we're privileged to work with, including the Cowichan Lake and River Stewardship Society, Somos Marsh Wildlife Society, Cowichan Community Land Trust, the Cowichan Working Group, the Cowichan Estuary Nature Center. So we're blessed to live in a community that is super active. One other thing I would say is we have a specific geographic footprint, but we're a partnership-based organization. A really quick story. Around Christmas, when we were looking at one of these funding agencies, I happened to run into a woman who works for Halalt, which is outside of our geographic area of interest. And they were saying, yeah, we're going to apply for that too. And I said, we don't want to be competing for this, right? This is not a good scenario. We want to be partnering. And in the end, it changed the whole approach we took. And we submitted a proposal in partnership, and we called it a twinned watershed approach. So it applied both to the work that we were interested in and the work on the Chemainus that Halalt was interested in. And my opinion was that we had a good chance because of the innovative work going on at Coast Island. But we extended the partnership. It turned out the funder really liked that we got our resources. I'm sure if there were two separate proposals from the same geographic area, only one organization would have received the money. So that's the kind of thing that happens in the CVRD, I think, between watersheds. So yes, we work closely within our own watershed, but I think there's always the opportunity to extend that partnership and try and establish something bigger than the individual groups. So hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you. So Director Kuhn and then Director McGonigal.
I'd like to get back to the numbers you mentioned. The 24 million. You said the majority of that was to benefit Cowichan tribes. I was under the impression that the majority of that would go to the Weir. Can you kind of break down the numbers? Is there going to be more money coming than for the Weir? Or? Thank you.
So I think I said the proponent was Cowichan tribes. I think the money will benefit all of us. My understanding is that there's three components of that. There's a lower watershed component, which will address the flooding issues in the lower part of the river. There's a mid-river component, which will address works that can be completed in the run of the river section that will also address flooding. And then there's the upper river component, which is basically the Weir. So works that will address drought. And so that's a large envelope of money spread out over a number of years, 7 years, and it's very early days, right? So I can't speak to the specifics, but those are the three large envelopes: lower river flooding, mid-river management, upper river like drought management, which is associated with the Weir and the infrastructure associated.
Follow up, Director Kuhn.
Yeah, just a little follow up. Do you have plans for further grants for the Weir? Or the Weir is going to be quite expensive, I imagine, and I imagine the 24 million might not even cover it if you applied it all to the Weir, which I doubt would happen anyway. So would there be more money coming? Do you expect more money to come? Or you know what my concern is right from the beginning when this whole discussion started. My concern was that the local taxpayers would be on the hook for that, and I really would not like that very much. So I wonder if what other plans you have there. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so I think it's a legitimate concern, and I'm not running the world, but I am quite confident that local taxpayers will not end up holding the bag for the Weir that we're looking at, the senior levels of government, the feds and the province. Certainly the DMAP grant is from the feds. I think once the work on the design, feasibility and engineering is over, then we'll have a solid estimate of the cost. And I have every expectation that senior levels of government will be picking that up. And I have always said this, that finding the resources to do the work is probably the easiest part of this job. I think it's making sure we're doing it right, making sure that the community as a whole is behind us, and making sure we have the proper water governance framework, including a license holder in place. Because whoever operates that weir in the future is going to be controlling our river for decades and making decisions on what that looks like for decades. And I think it's going to be really important that we get that piece right. If we get all those pieces in place, senior levels of government are going to be extremely supportive of the work. That's world according to Tom. We'll see in the next few years if I'm right or wrong.
Thank you.
Your word in God's ear.
And last but not least, Director McGonigal.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. First of all, thank you very much, Tom. I appreciate all the hard work that you and the Watershed Board do. I think we take for granted the expertise and passion that resides within that group and the countless hours that are put in by not only the Watershed Board, but the society as well, for the small contribution that the CBRD makes and the leveraging that we just heard of from that fund that is applied. So with thanks from the upper watershed, I want to raise my hands and thank you for all the work you do.
Great. Thank you, Director McGonigal. Thank you very much, Tom, for the very encouraging and inspiring comments. And I think I see Director Stone.
I wonder if we could, if it would be acceptable to move up R3 to follow the delegation. It's dealing with the Cowichan Watershed Board DWWP program. It just might be, at the pleasure of the chair of the board, it's more timely to have that discussion flowing out of this presentation.
Okay, Director Toporowski, you're moving that?
No, I need to be moved into the lobby because of my affiliation with Cowichan Tribes as a counselor. Because if there's going to be any decisions or recommendations being moved, is that what you're talking about, Aaron? R3?
Yeah, I was talking about R3. I was talking about bringing it up, but as a watershed, I just not sure why you'd have to be recused, but that would be up to you, I suppose. I don't know, Ms. Legault, if there's any reason that Ms. Toporowski or Director Toporowski would need to declare a conflict as a watershed board member. This is about funding for the watershed board, R3.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's up to the Director Stone. It's up to the director to declare a conflict, and I don't have enough information at this time to provide an educated opinion.
Okay. Thank you, Director Marsh.
Well, we know our chair is a member of the Watershed Board too, and I don't see any reason he needs to recuse himself. So, but I agree, Ms. Legault's right. Director Toporowski has to decide for herself, but I certainly don't see it that way.
All right, thank you. So I think what we can do is, yes, we'll bring R3 up, but first I think it's time for a recess. So why don't we have a 10-minute recess and reconvene here at 10:45.
Thanks, Tom.
Again. Thanks, Tom.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, take good care, everybody.
You too.
Cameras live.
Okay, thank you. So welcome back, everyone. So we are at reports, and we had said we would move item R3 up. So Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item R3 is a report from Environmental Services Division on the Drinking Water and Watershed Protection Program proposal from the Cowichan Watershed Board. And the recommendation is that it be recommended to the board, one, that the Cowichan Watershed Board proposal be accepted as meeting the requirements of a strategic partnership under the DWWP partnership policy for a 3-year period at an annual value of $50,000. Two, that staff be directed to develop a partnership agreement with the Cowichan Watershed Board for implementation of the proposed activities. 3, that the proposal and agreement be referred to the DWWP Technical Advisory Committee for information at its inaugural meeting in 2021. And 4, that a regular formal communications process between the board and the designated representatives of the Cowichan Watershed Board be developed.
Okay, thank you. I do see Ms. Miller, but procedurally, do you want to move this first? Is that what you're thinking, Director Yanni DiNardo?
Yeah, I wanted to move the recommendation.
Second, Director Stone. Okay, we'll hear from Ms. Miller. Discussion.
Thank you. You have before you the staff recommendation that the Cowichan Watershed Board's application and proposal under the Drinking Water and Watershed policy be approved. They have further requested for continuity of service that the proposal be approved for a multi-year period, which is a little different than typically, but it makes sense in terms of the continuity for the next 3 years. And lastly, in discussions with the Cowichan Watershed Board representatives is to try to refocus and build a stronger communications relationship between the Watershed Board and the CVRD's Board of Directors generally. So currently there are a number of directors who sit on the Watershed Board as representatives of the CVRD, but there isn't a formal mechanism for those representatives to report back to the CVRD Board, receive guidance or input into their activities within the board itself. And so that forms kind of the third pillar of the proposed work over the next few years. And I think this is particularly of interest and importance given the position we're at now with regards to the long-term strategies for water security within the region and the discussions relative to licensing and weir ownership and management. So you have that before you in terms of the staff report, the associated application from the Watershed Board, and for your reference, the approved policy document that is supported within the DWWP program.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Miller. So for questions, I have Director Stone, Director McGonigal, and Director Smith.
Yeah, not so much questions, just I wanted to sort of reiterate some points that, you know, I didn't know what Tim and Tom's presentation would be, but I think that they covered it quite fulsomely in terms of the many both practical, direct financial, and the sort of tertiary and maybe less obvious benefits of the work of the Cowichan Watershed Board. I think it's come into sharp focus in the last few years in both dealing with the droughts, the flooding, and then the subsequent funding opportunities and approvals that have been garnered. And I just want to also just touch on some of the other things that, if, you know, reading the reports attached here and those provided by the Watershed Board as part of their delegation, the real broad range of activities that take place go all the way from the grassroots level of education and awareness to sort of mitigative and restorative measures during times of good times and during times of crisis, whether it's low flows and helping to save fish, or mitigating some of the other challenges around flooding and working within the larger group and the communities around mitigating some of those challenges. And I think Tim spoke so eloquently towards those sort of intangible benefits that I don't think I need to reiterate them here. But even at the beginning of this term, we had the opportunity to get together with the elders and have a lunch and talk about what the river means to the Cowichan people and really to everyone who lives and loves being in the Cowichan. So I don't think I need to reiterate those as well, but I just want to highlight the sort of more practical benefits to the region and the CVRD for that work. And really that is the multiplication effect of relatively small amount of funding from the CVRD and the endorsement that relationship and this opportunity that's before us today provides. That relatively small amount of funding is being leveraged into significant dollars to advance the work of the Watershed Board in the consideration of everyone who lives here. So I just want to speak strongly in favor of that work. Being sort of on the front lines, if you will, for the last year and a half has really given me the opportunity to really truly appreciate how hard that group works and how for a relatively small budget, the numerous benefits that are provided, whether it's the salmon costume or and that awareness building, or that down on in the river work that gets done by those volunteers on a regular basis, and the policy expertise that's brought to bear as well at the highest level. It really goes from grassroots to the most highly educated environmental and water-based professionals that we could possibly ask for. And I just want to speak strongly in favor of this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. And next, Director McGonigal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and hopefully we'll see Chair Stone in that Chinook costume in the very near future. I would most definitely like to see that. First of all, a couple of points, if I may. I think the bullet number 4 is probably one of the most important, is the communications process back to the board, aside from the yearly updates from Tom and Tim. I think it's important to keep up to date on the work of the Cowichan Watershed Board and the Society. My question through the chair, if I may, on the 3-year annual contribution, is that renewable after 3 years, or it will come back to the board, or what is the process in that policy? If you could remind me, please.
Ms. Miller.
Through the chair to Director McGonigal, the process right now is for the strategic partnerships to be approved by the board. And so the idea would be that because there is a lot going on at this point in time, we have the new drinking water program, we've got the progression of the issues regarding the weir and the Coxsila, that it would be appropriate to come back and touch base with the board again at the 3-year mark and review and renew what that strategic partnership might look like going into the future, right? So it becomes a living relationship, a living opportunity to refresh those objectives and what each partner brings to the table in terms of the desired outcome. So yes, it would come back to the board for the board's approval for continuation.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, Director Smith.
Thank you very much. I have a concern about number 1, the drinking water protection policy, partnership policy. There was a recommendation when this was brought forward that it be reviewed within 1 year. And if we're making an agreement for a 3-year period, we won't have had that review. So this may be putting the cart before the horse in that regard to having a 3-year period. It was interesting to hear Deborah, so that would be something that I would like clarification on from staff. The other thing I was wondering is, do we have a conflict of interest? I know that Deborah was speaking about stepping away from this conversation. We have, I'm not sure how many directors sit on the Cowichan Watershed Board, and they are then voting today to allocate funds to a group. So I just wanted clarification, and I see Aaron has his hand up. So, you know, I think it's really important that we are in a public meeting and that the public understand that relationship so that we're not looking at any conversations around the conflict of interest. And another one is, I hear a lot about weir management, weir ownership. This is funded by all Cowichan Valley Regional District taxpayers, and constantly hearing about weir, Cowichan River. a little bit disheartening, I think, for some of the other areas who also would like to work towards drinking water and watershed protection. So I'm not really sure if we need more clarification on exactly the weir management and how it fits under this drinking water protection program. So maybe Ms. Miller could please clarify some of those areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Miller.
Thank you. All excellent questions. So maybe I'll address the conflict of interest issue first. The Cowichan Watershed Board itself is a subset of the Cowichan Watershed Society, who actually is the legal entity. It does not have any board representation on it, so there is no conflict of interest. And this was brought up a number of years ago as one of the items that was adjusted to ensure that there was no conflict, because we do want there to be political representation on the board in terms of process. So that separates the financial component. So that was one issue. The other is with regards to the importance of the Cowichan watershed to the region entirely. It is more than just the weir for Cowichan and one distinct community. It drives tourism, recreation, phenomenal amount of investment in the area. Benefits all the communities. It also benefits many communities outside of the Cowichan region, in that it is an index river for the BC US Salmon Treaty, which has major implications for the economies of most of our coastal communities, as well as some of our interior communities. And so it's a very complex issue, and it can't just be distilled down to one issue of the weir or of paper excellence as a license owner. It has multiple benefits in the same way as, clear water is more beneficial for recreation than, murky, silt-laden water. It's complicated in terms of the multiple compounding benefits. The other issue under the Drinking Water and Watershed Protection Program, when we went to the public, as Director Kuhn is aware, we did make a commitment that the drinking water program would help facilitate these discussions, but it is not the entity that funds or pays for the capital works or implementation of those particular issues. And so while we're concerned with the weir, what we're really concerned with across the region is long-term sustainable water supply. And that impacts the northern areas, and particularly the southern area where we are growing faster than anywhere else in the region. It's just that this is one way to support those particular targets across the region. It happens to be a very visible target as we're in the middle of doing the engineering design through the CBRD at this point in time. So I'm hoping I've answered or addressed your concerns.
Follow-up, Dr. Smith?
Thank you for that information. The one that that I did bring up was the partnership policy review within a year of us passing it earlier. I can't remember. I think it was in the fall, and we were going to be doing a review in a year, and yet we are going into a 3-year commitment with one particular group. So was just thinking maybe we should have the review in that time frame, and then relook at where we go from there, and not make this commitment for 3 years at this time.
Thank you. If I may, it was a board decision to request a review at the 1-year period with regards to the policy. It is the watershed's request that they have a 3-year continuity agreement. So it would be the board's prerogative whether they wanted to simply approve the agreement for a year pending the review at that time.
Thank you. So I saw Director Stone. Still have any?
I just clarify a couple of things. The WEIR funding is by BC Schriff. All of the engineering engagement work and stuff is not funded by the CVRD's small $50,000 a year portion. That's a multi-million-dollar project funded by BC Schriff the Salmon Restoration Fund, and the federal DMAF funding is funding the larger 7-year program around infrastructure works through the length of the river, and of course, most notably, the WEIR construction. Of course, there is always the opportunity that the funds that are allocated already wouldn't be sufficient to build the WEIR, and as was mentioned by Mr. Rutherford, more funding would be sought if that was the case. You know, in this context, the $50,000 allocation is very small relative to the work that is completed. There is very much more than justification in my mind of $50,000 a year based on all the work that they do outside of the funding, the work that has been funded by BC Schriff and the DMAF funding. So I, again, just strongly support this recommendation and hope the board will continue to support the Cowichan Watershed Board and the example that's been set.
Thank you. So I have Director Morrison and then Marsh. No? Okay, Director Marsh.
Yeah, thank you. All the things that Director Chair Stone said. I think I hear Director Smith's concern, and I don't expect, given we've had this relationship with them for 10 years. I'm not sure if we funded them for all those 10 years, but all the years that I've been here, we funded them for $50,000 a year. So I see it in a different way. I see, wow, they're going to go in it for $50,000 for 3 more years without asking for more money. I don't think that would preclude having a report or whatever the reconsideration at the 1 year, like maybe we'd want to change the work plan or something. I don't really know what Director Smith's thinking, but as to the point that we get more regular updates, I think it would be easy enough. Mayor Sebring gives a mayor's report at every meeting. I'm sure Chair Stone, or if we wanted it at committee, Chair Salmon, but it would probably be better if it was Chair Stone or Deb, who are on the committee. We set a time when we want an update, and if like maybe a regular update quarterly or something from them, or like as a line item on an agenda, and then if something extra normal comes up in between, they can always put it on an agenda. So I feel really blown away by how they have leveraged that $50,000. It's like, wow, it's just incredible. And so I do support it. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. I'll leave that one with Chair Stone to discuss later, perhaps. Any further questions? Okay, so we have the recommendations moved and seconded. I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next item, Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are going back to item R1, which is a report from the Community Planning Division on the referral of the Regional District of Nanaimo Regional Growth Strategy Amendment for the airport. We do have RDN staff in the meeting with us to answer any questions, Kim Fowler and Nick Redpath. The recommendation proposed is that it be recommended to the board that the Regional District of Nanaimo be advised that the Cowichan Valley Regional District accepts the proposed Regional Growth Strategy Amendment in the vicinity of Nanaimo Airport.
Thank you. So I see Mr. Redpath. Do you have a presentation for us? Comments?
I'll let Mr. Tippett go ahead.
Mr. Tippett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good day to everyone. Yeah, the purpose of having the 2 delegates from Nanaimo Regional District here was really to answer any questions that the committee may have. When this appeared at the board meeting at February 24th of this year, there were certain technical questions regarding the the effect that the proposed change to the growth management strategy could have in terms of land use in the future of the area. And so when I invited the two representatives from RDN to appear, it was in the context of them answering those questions. So my suggestion would be, if you have any questions regarding the content of the report, please ask me. If you have any technical questions about the interpretation of the growth management strategy amendment or the complementary zoning and OCP amendment, that would be appropriate to direct to the two delegates from RDN. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So do we have any questions for any of our three? Director Markman and then Director Marsh.
Hi, and thank you for attending and answering some questions. And I'm new to this role, and so I don't have a lot of history, so I apologize if you're repeating some of these answers. But the questions that I have, really, I'll start at the top level I have, and then maybe work my way down as other directors have a chance to ask questions as well. But I guess I'm really trying to understand who's going to be driving the bus regarding the airport development and expansion as things unfold in the future, because I'm not clear if it's the RDN or if it's the NAC, and maybe you can start with that one, and I have a follow-up.
Who would like to take that one? Okay, please go ahead. Thank you.
Hi, through the chair to the director, the land use development will be done by the airport. So the responsibility of the regional district of Nanaimo is the land use zoning, which is what these bylaws are proposing to do, that is consistent with the land use plan developed by the airport. It went through public consultation about a year and a half ago. So the development of the airport is the airport's responsibility. Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Follow up, Director Markman.
Thanks for that. And so the idea of having this in the regional growth strategy, what is the question that you're asking of the board right now? Because I was not clear. I know that there was a letter of support sent in October last fall, and I think they're looking at, is there's any concerns from the board, or you're looking for a letter of support? What is it that you're requesting right now?
Thank you, Mr. Redpath.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So what the Regional District of Nanaimo is requesting right now, and it will be sent out later today, because yesterday the Regional Growth Strategy Amendment received first and second reading from our Board of Directors. So the 60-day, so that triggers a 60-day acceptance to affected local governments. So that would be City of Nanaimo, all the member municipalities within the Regional District, and then surrounding local governments, the CVRD and the Comox Valley Regional District. So what you'll receive later today is a 60-day request for acceptance. And as per Part 13 of the Local Government Acts, all affected local governments have to provide a board resolution of acceptance to the Regional Growth Strategy Amendment for us to be able to move forward prior to us giving a third reading. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so I have Director Marsh and then Stone and then Nicholson.
Thank you, Chair Salmon. Through you to the proponents or the staff, I guess, from the RDN. I guess my only concern is how this might affect the Stamanis new little village and the little village area in Cedar. And because it seems like originally, and I have to go back to that document, I'm sorry, it was originally zoned, split zoned industrial and resource and green space. Is that correct?
Fowler?
Yes, that's true.
So was the industrial the airport, or was that something else?
Fowler?
Mr. Chair, through to the director, we need to talk about the regional growth strategy as a land use designation, not zoning. The OCP and zoning bylaw amendments have gone through approvals through a public hearing. So this is a regional growth strategy amendment. This, the regional growth strategy amendment is to amend two maps, or actually for two purposes, the maps to make the land uses that are proposed under the airport land use plan consistent with the regional growth strategy. So there's two map amendments which do introduce, extend the Cassidy Village Center up through the commercial area proposed by the airport, and then also change and make consistent with the uses proposed to the east, consistent with the regional growth strategy land uses. And I wish to note, as said, there actually is not a commercial designation in the regional growth strategy. So industrial is the closest fit to the land use that is being proposed through the OCP and rezoning or zoning bylaw amendments and consistent with the airport land use plan. Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Director Stone.
Yeah, so just recognizing what was the comment that was made before about the 60-day window. So basically, the 60-day window is to provide what staff is recommending today. So that's a question to staff. Is this 60-day window sort of wiped away by the board adopting these motion to us today, these recommendations?
Mr. Tippett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We actually received a sort of informal notice of the proposed regional growth strategy amendment prior to, as was noted by Nick earlier, the formal readings of the growth management strategy amendment. Were the committee to agree with my recommendation and move forward with option one, then we would simply, well, I guess at the next board meeting, which is what, this afternoon? I'm not sure if this item will be on this afternoon's agenda if it moves forward, but we would immediately communicate acceptance to the RDN, and then they'd just be waiting for their other member municipalities and the other CVRD to comment back on that matter within the 60-day period. So it's I guess we're a little bit ahead of the curve in terms of the timeline in that sense.
Follow up, Director Stone.
Mr. Chair. Thank you. The reason I note that is there's a meeting pending, I think, in the next week or so with some of the players, including the Regional District, Airport Commission, some federal folks. So I'm feeling that this may be a little bit premature, being that this 60-day clock is just ticking and there's a lot of unanswered questions. So just for clarity, for the developments that are proposed here under these land use changes, where will the water come from to service these new developments anticipated by this growth strategy and land use amendments that will flow from that? Because I recognize the airport plan in itself, but this also affects some adjacent properties that will be likely sort of developed to suit the RGS and, you know, maybe further zoning amendments that come forward.
Ms. Fowler.
The question is, where will the water come from?
Mr. Chair, when development proceeds, when and if development proceeds on the airport lands, they are required to go through building permit, whether that is through the federal approval process or through the provincial approval process. They will then be required to ensure, and this also includes if they subdivide, that they can provide adequate septic facilities or sewage wastewater treatment systems, as well as water treatment. So they are required to go through that process. Island Health is aware of the status of the systems that are on the airport lands right now. And my understanding is they have said essentially any expansion of the airport would require an expansion to those services or new systems that would meet Island Health standards. Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have several other questions. I can keep going, or if there's others on the list, they can go first.
Director Nicholson next.
Thank you. I am wondering, so I understand that basically the change is that the village center is going to be extended. And I'm wondering what the implications are for ALR land.
Mr. Redpath.
Through the chair to the director. So currently the airport lands for the most part do fall within the agricultural land reserve, but in 1997 there was a covenant put on that land between the ALC, there the grantee, and the Nanaimo Airport Commission to exclude approximately 50 hectares from the ALR to allow the addition of airport related uses along a portion of the airport west of the terminal building adjacent to the Trans-Canada Highway. So part of this exclusion, a restrictive covenant was placed on the property, which limits the permitted uses in the area excluded from the ALR. And the ALC have indicated that the covenant is still active and that it may be necessary for the Nanaimo Airport Commission to confer with them on any proposed land uses to ensure consistency with the covenant. And also in policy 8.82 of the proposed OCP amendment, it identifies and recognizes ALC covenant restricting these uses to related commercial and light industrial activities, and recognizes that consultation with the airport and ALC may be required as part of this process. So we are aware it is a lot of the land of the Nanaimo Airport Commission is within the agricultural land reserve. And what is excluded for airport uses does have a covenant on it, and the ALC may be involved for any type of proposed uses moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Nicholson?
I have another question, but can you come back to me, please?
Okay. So I have Director Marsh and then back to Director Stone and then back to Nicholson.
I'm kind of feeling, given that the maps aren't included, that just as my responsibility, I'd like to see the maps if I'm being asked to vote on something, which is a regional growth strategy that isn't part of Cowichan Valley really, except for one area. And since there's 60 days, I think I'd like to, I'm not sure what Mr. Redpath's putting up there. I would like to maybe just talk about this at next regional services after we've received and had time to study the maps.
Just a point of clarification, Mr. Chair, they're included as attachment C in the staff report.
Okay, well, I apologize. I'm learning to use two screens with one mouse, so I'll go to attachment C and I'll turn it over to whoever's next and I may come back.
Okay, thank you. I'll put Director Smith next since she has not spoken yet. Director Smith?
Thank you. Can you clarify the covenant a little bit more? I just heard, and maybe it's my headset, you indicated that they were airport related businesses. And so I'm just wondering if that's what the covenant is stating or if that's an interpretation of that covenant.
Redpath?
Through the chair to the director, the covenant does state that it has to be, so it says there's restricts uses to nothing other than airport related commercial and light industrial activities related to airport related uses. So it's open to, it has to be specifically airport related. That was the intent. And any type of proposed uses that potentially might not be related will have to go through the ALC, and they will make the determination on that as they are the grantee on that covenant. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, and next, Director Stone.
Yeah, so just continuing on the water discussion, I know the sensitivity and the concerns around the aquifer have always been a present discussion in the CVRD as it relates to the airport uses. And the reason that I still don't feel like we have some certainty is that with some of the concerns around the aquifer being unanswered, it seems like I appreciate that there's different jurisdictions that are relevant to, septic systems and stuff. But if we're talking about the kind of plan for not only the airport, but looking at the maps and Schedule C, the extension of the village core, and then perhaps what they call a potential expansion area on the other side of Timberland Road, that if there is a significant amount of density, especially transitory density, such as hotels, you'll have a great increase of water consumption and then septage that's dumped out. And I just question the efficacy of a septic type system over aquifer that has had challenges in the past. As we saw with the Schnitzer fire or any development in the area, including this conversation that seems to have been ongoing forever regarding the airport in its current state, the concerns around the aquifer's ability to not only provide water, but to protect the aquifer. And it just feels like, even in my short time in local government, the protections from the aquifer keep getting chipped away, while the potential demands on the aquifer tend to seemingly increase quite dramatically. Cassidy, I spent grade 1 at that tiny little school on Val's Road. Has always been a very rural, very spread out community. And however, this RGS amendment and potential development enabled by that could dramatically increase the density and the draw on the aquifer, as well as the wastewater output into what I don't think would be suitable management systems over that kind of an aquifer. I'm not the scientist, but I just never have seen a report that seems to address those concerns in a way that has reassured the community. I know maybe Director Martman can speak to it more directly, but I know I've heard a lot from area residents. I live in Area H, and there's concerns there. So it's just a point that I think needs to be made around the wisdom of enabling more development when seemingly, at least to the satisfaction of the public, we haven't ensured that that surety of the protection and reliability of the aquifer over time. So I'll just put that out there as a point, and free to make comments on it. And just, you know, I'm recognizing that with the growth of the airport, and will only be generally for economic reasons and stuff, I'm a huge supporter of the airport and have been for many years. However, it stands to recognize that there's been significant and growing negative impacts on surrounding communities as the airport has grown so quickly. We've seen a little bit of a reprieve from that during the COVID time, and it's been noticeable to those that live in the area. I joke that I can take a photo of the belly of every airplane that comes into the Nanaimo airport, and so can anybody who lives in Ladysmith. So that leads to the question about this referral. You said to local governments will receive these referrals. Does that include all municipalities and affected First Nations in the area?
I would like to take that one, Mr. Redpath.
Through the chair to the director, yes, that includes, so the affected local governments are the City of or District of Landsville, City of Parksville, Town of Qualicum Beach, Comox Valley Regional District, Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District, and Comox Valley Regional District. Also, there's a list of First Nations that within the area that will all be receiving this referral as well, and also provincial and federal organizations as well. So there's, I think, approximately about 25 different referrals will be going out. Thank you.
Thank you. So you mentioned Parksville and Lantzville, but you didn't mention Ladysmith, which is likely the most, or Staminas First Nation specifically, which are likely the most negatively impacted by future development at the airport. So just for clarity, those municipalities will be receiving those, and First Nations will be receiving those referrals as well?
Staminas, yes. Ladysmith, no. They were consulted on the official community plan and the zoning amendments earlier in the process, but we're following the Regional Growth Strategy Amendment as laid out in the Local Government Act, and they were not identified as a affected local government. So they have been involved in the process up to now, so they are aware of it, but for the 60-day acceptance, they're not required to accept it. Thank you.
So municipalities such as Lantzville and Parksville that are many, many, many miles away are being consulted on the RGS, but not the municipality of Ladysmith, which is 7 kilometers and the most near proximity to the airport, and the one that receives most of the negative lifestyle impacts of any growth at the airport. But they're not being consulted because under the Local Government Act, you're required to consult Parksville and Lantzville, but not Ladysmith.
Mr. Redpath.
Through the chair. That is correct. Through the Local Government Act, we're not required to request a 60-day acceptance from them. They have been involved in the process up until now, but through this process for the Regional Growth Strategy Amendment, we're looking at the affected local governments as outlined in the Local Government Act for their 60-day acceptance. Thank you.
Okay, I would challenge how that makes sense, being that Parksville and Lanceville will have no appreciable impacts from any expansion at the airport. However, the community closest to it is not being referred to. As the mayor of Ladysmith, I'm quite aware of the engagement or lack thereof with the municipality on the plans around the airport. It seems to be more a considerable of consideration and invite, but I don't see any consultation that's meaningful ongoing there, and that presents, I think, a significant challenge. But I won't cross those swords in this meeting. I'll bring that to our council, and our council can decide whether they want to bring forward that protest. I still don't think that the concerns around the aquifer have been adequately addressed, and I would recommend that the board. I won't be supporting this at this time. We have 60 days to do further consideration. I don't think the answers are sufficient around the impacts on the aquifer specifically, or the other negative impacts that the growth around the airport that has gone relatively unchecked for the last decade have on the most adjacent communities, and the lack of desire or willingness or requirement to consult those most affected by the impacts of the airport expansion, I think are concerning to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Stone. So yeah, we don't have a motion on the floor yet. I do have 2 more speakers, so when we're done those, hopefully we can come back to maybe one of the options is suitable. So Director Nicholson.
Thank you. Yeah, I share Director Stone's that this is sort of the direction I was going to head. So just to complete, so I'm completely clear on this. Has there been any informal community consultation with the neighboring Stumanis, Ladysmith, and Area H communities?
Mr. Redpath?
Yes, we've been engaging ongoing and early on in the process through touching base on the regional growth strategy, the official community plan, and the proposed zoning amendments. This included workshops or public open houses, office hours, notifications, ongoing referrals with First Nations, the community, and the local governments moving forward. So this process has been going since about 2019, and we're coming into the later stages of it with the regional growth strategy amendment. So there has been ongoing engagement throughout this process. Thank you.
Thank you. Follow
up? No, but I would just say that it sounds to me from the discussions and the concerns raised that there hasn't been enough community understanding about what is being proposed and awareness. And I am really concerned about the way we, in the process, the way we hunt water to farther down, when it should be one of the first things we consider before we think about where we're going to grow. And certainly when you have an OCP or a growth management strategy, you set expectations. And so it's really important that we invest in understanding water first, because it really is going to control things, and it would really save a lot of time if we could get that straight at the beginning.
Thank you. Ms. Fowler.
Through the chair to the director, I'll give you a summary of the public consultation as it occurred in the last year and a half. The project information and engagement opportunities are shared through several methods: advertising in the Nanaimo News Bulletin, Parksville Qualicum Beach News, Take 5, social media posts to Facebook and Twitter, posters placed in key locations, emails to OCP, past OCP members, and any interested community groups that contacted us. We had a project website still is up for over a year and a half. Timelines, documents, videos, opportunity to sign up to follow the project, social media posts to advertise events, public hearing notice in the Nanaimo News Bulletin, and Parksville Qualicum Beach News. We've had engagement opportunities. We had office hours in Cassidy for about a week. We had open houses on Thursday, November 19th, 2019. We had another open house on November 21st, 2019. And we've met with any interested community groups. And we've also had a public hearing on the OCP and bylaw amendments. So, and as I said, the website, we have a question and answer videos and information available, and staff available to answer those questions. So the public consultation has been extensive. One of the items which I wish to note is that if the RDN does not proceed with these bylaws, does not stop the airport, in their opinion, from proceeding with development. as they have stated they don't recognize some parts of the land use. We've agreed to do land use bylaws, OCP amendments, and RGS amendments that are consistent with the area, with the airport's land use plan. But if there was no zoning, no changes proposed that are being proposed, then they still may proceed and go through a development process which has the same risks that the currently the zoning has for aquifers and other issues. So the request of please address all of the issues prior to development is likely not going to be addressed through these bylaws. What it does provide is a significant update to land use bylaws that are several decades old, a project that's been around the regional district for over a decade. We are trying to be working in concert with the airport. It will not address all of the development standards that are required in rezonings or subdivisions or development permits, building permits that are subsequent to this. So that is my advice to the members, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Fowler. Okay, so I'm aware of time, but we do have continuing interest on the list. I have Directors Marsh, Markman, Stone, and Sebring, or Sebring and Stone, actually, in that order, and Toporowski.
Thank you very much. So is the reason that you didn't consult Ladysmith as much as you did Parksville and Qualicum because Parksville and Qualicum are members of the Regional District of Nanaimo?
Fowler?
Mr. Chair, through to the director, there are requirements. There are two types of consultation. This one for a regional growth strategy amendment, as Mr. Redpath noted, has specific instruction of who's a deemed an affected local government. And what we have explained is that the town of Ladysmith under provincial legislation is not deemed an affected local government. Prior to the regional growth strategy amendment, the OCP amendments and the proposed zoning bylaw amendments were done on a much wider consultation, including the town of Ladysmith. They did receive a referral and they did respond back.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. I heard you say that. I'm concerned about the water and the aquifer as well, and I would prefer to put this decision off for a while. I'm part of the High Ground in Columbia Institute workshop this week, and Minister Osborne will be there, and I believe Minister Farnsworth. And I have heard a rumor that the Local Government Act might be soon amended. I don't know how soon is, but you know, it has been around for quite a while, and since there's 60 days, and not that I believe our yay or nay will really affect it. I just have to stick with my conscience, and I need to know more about the water. And I also have to express that I'm concerned with what seems like sprawl. I mean, this is the southernmost tip of the Nanaimo RDN. And so that concerns me too, because, you know, all the best information we're getting now is that sprawl is the wrong way to go. So I'm sorry, but I can't support it today. I may later, unless the board goes ahead.
Thank you, Director Marsh. Director Martman, did you have comment? Okay.
Thank you. And I just wanted to follow up because I know we are talking about the aquifer, and I know this is not just our concern. I know it's a concern of all regional districts, including Nanaimo, and that they've said this too in many of their documents. But I do know that within my area that there is a sense that though you may have communicated out, they haven't communicated back in, and I think that that's the part of two-way communication that maybe what I'm getting from my residents is that they want to have input, they want to know what's going on. So maybe there's a disconnect somehow that's occurring there. But to go back to the aquifer, I mean, this is a precious commodity. This is an asset that we have and we share as regional districts. And I think the biggest thing that I hear in our area is that what is this going to be going forward? is it going to be elected officials that are going to be the ones that are going to be having the say on what happens to it? And I have concerns when corporations or businesses or any commission like the airport they're not elected officials, and they may be driving development that may be detrimental to protection and safeguarding of the aquifer, no matter what we do. And so to me, I think it's paramount that we can work together to try to look and say, what is it that we need to do today to safeguard it? What do we have to do to protect ourselves from climate change down the road when we're facing more, in this area, I understand, more floods and more droughts? And what's that going to look like? So I think I need to know more. I'm open to learning more, but I know the residents of my area do want to know more and want to have input. And the last piece around this, and I know it's not likely to be part as much about land use for the RDN, but it is around land use for the CVRD, because the airport has rules around, maybe not rules, but maybe more restrictions on adjacent lands compatibility, and what can we do and what are we going to be permitted or not permitted to do on CVRD lands around height of buildings, types of commercial enterprises. Talking to the president of the Nanaimo Airport Commission, they're concerned about having anything that have birds on it. So a compost, an organization wants to put a compost facility together and they have birds around it, would be detrimental to the airport. So there are things that are going to be happening at the airport that are going to be impacting our residents and our ability for land use too. So those are all big concerns that I have. So thank you. No particular question.
Thank you, Dr. Markman. Director Sebring.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've been listening intently and with a lot of interest, and I appreciate the distinctions in the Local Government Act and the Charter between a regional growth strategy and an OCP amendment. And while I appreciate them in fact, I do not appreciate them in reality. It makes no sense that Lanceville and Parksville get consulted and Ladysmith doesn't. And I would add, it doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense that North Cowichan doesn't get consulted either. We're the biggest player outside of Nanaimo in terms of the catchment area. We haven't seen anything from at our table with respect to this regional growth strategy and this airport plan. I fully understand, and I'm trying to be respectful to the regional district staff from Nanaimo. You are fulfilling your statutory obligations, but I would politely suggest that you go back to your board and say, statutory obligations may be these, but we got a problem, because the reality is Ladysmith 6 miles down the road isn't getting consulted and Parksville is. That doesn't make sense. You have to expand that consultation piece for some of the reasons that Director Markman mentioned, because what you're doing here, if this goes ahead, and this is the other ironic piece, you don't even need our permission, is what we were told. I mean, we could say no and the thing will still go ahead. Plus, overlaid on that is you've got the federal reality that this thing is an aerodrome and none of us have any regulatory authority when it really comes down to it. So it's a very complicated file, and I get that. But we need to do better. And I will absolutely not be supporting the recommendation that's on the agenda today.
Thank you. Mr. Redpath, please.
Through the chair to the director, just a point of clarity. As you are considered, or as the CVRD is considered an affected local government, we are requesting a resolution of acceptance. If we do not get that, the Local Government Act will initiate, or through the Local Government Act, we have to initiate a resolution and potential arbitration process until we come to a conclusion. So just to be clear, that if we do not receive a resolution of acceptance on this matter, then it will kick off an entirely new process, and the province, the minister, will get involved, and we'll have to go through a resolution process. Thank you.
What I might, as a supplemental then, with all due respect, that I misunderstood what we heard earlier. If that's the case, let's preclude that, cut to the chase, and do a proper consultation, particularly with my friend Mayor Stone, and also with my council in North Cowichan. Because short of that, I think you're going to have problems getting this resolution. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I think we've got two more. Director Toporowski's not spoken yet. I'll go to her first, and then Director Stone maybe has a way to wrap it up. Director
I see
Toporowski.
Michelle's waving too.
Oh, sorry, and Director Staples next as well.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to hear the list of First Nations because you said you had a list, and I just wanted you to name them off, if you could.
Through the chair to the director. Yes, I'll just pull that up. 1 second here. Thanks.
Thank you.
And while you're doing that, I just wanted to say it's very important to listen to these First Nations because the history is not written in books and on shelves. The history that we read today are from settlers that have diaries that have been put in museums and submitted to government. So those oral histories are with the First Nations elders, and they know the importance of the land and what's connected to what's going to be developed on these lands.
Thank you. Mr. Redpath? There we go. So that's a list of 5 First Nations.
Okay.
All right.
Sorry, I was on mute there. Yes, this is a list. So you can see the screen?
Yes.
So this is a list of the First Nations consulted as part of the Regional Growth Strategy Amendment. There were additional ones as part of the OCP and Bylaw 500. This is the board approved RGS consultation plan that was approved on January 18th. And additional stakeholders that were identified, as you can see down here, these are the ones identified by the Local Government Act as affected local governments, and then additional organizations and provincial and federal ministries that have also been consulted. Thank you.
Thank you. Follow up?
Yes, so I just want to mention that you have Chemainus First Nations in there, and they are in and around the town of Ladysmith. So I just wanted to, I have that same question why the town of Ladysmith isn't included in it, but I did read in some other documents, which I can't find right now, but from earlier discussions about this, there was that having someone appointed to a committee, was that correct? Or when these things were moving forward for the discussion of the airport expansion?
Ms. Fowler?
There isn't any committee that was appointed for the development of these bylaws, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll go to Director Staples and then Director Stone.
Thank you, and thanks everyone for all the input into this. And I really feel strongly that Ladysmith and also Director Martman's area needs to be consulted, and before I feel confident in approving this, and recognizing that, you know, I think part of I feel like everything that I have to say has been spoken. What prompted me to speak was really that, you know, that sort of arbitration conversation right away when we're really talking. I just don't like that that's where we go, whether it's legal, the legal process or not. That, you know, there should be a way to pause and say, okay, it's obviously very important that we miss this, even though it's not in a legislated area that we have to, but we do recognize the importance of discussing this with these 2 jurisdictions, or 3 if North Cowichan's included. So I would just hope that there's space for that before anything around arbitration has to be brought up. So I will not be supporting this without that process taking place for consultation.
Thank you. Okay, I do have Director Stone and then Director Smith.
So, you know, and I appreciate all of the legal and legislative responsibilities, but it's poignant or sort of illustrative to me that just a quick search shows that Parksville is 51.6 kilometers from the airport lands, and Shawnigan Lake is 56. And yet none of the local governments had any real deep consultation around this. And yes, open houses are nice. We attended them. Plans look interesting. I'm a big supporter of regional economic development. I don't see it as subtractive. I see it as complementary. We've seen that with Oyster Bay and the town of Ladysmith, that they both worked really well together to help support each other's outcomes. But when I was hearing through the list of consultation, really the only way that somebody who wasn't out there seeking it themselves to be involved in this would be to come across a poster or a social media post. And to me, that doesn't sort of stand up to today's test for consultation, regardless of what the legislation says. And I get the legislation, but that's sort of what I had seen in the last several years as an old trope that we won't fall back on anymore, that meaningful community consultation doesn't just rely on the bare minimum outlined under legislation, but really is meaningful and meant to respect the impacts on communities that these kinds of developments have. I also note in looking at the maps that provided that there's significantly more land not involved in the airport areas than within. So although we're talking about, oh, the airport can do whatever they want, may or may not be the case depending on your interpretation of the law, but it says that you know, the airport will go ahead with what they go ahead with. But however, if you look at the maps in the attached Schedule C, which is the Schedule 2 of the bylaw, the potential expansion area in the Cassidy Village Center lands are significantly larger than those contained within the airport. So again, when we're talking about demand on systems, natural systems and otherwise, and infrastructure required, it's still not adequately addressed, and the impacts potentially through this RGS amendment and subsequent development that may follow as a result of the RGS amendment could well outstrip the impacts of the Nanaimo airport lands, with the surrounding lands included in Schedule 2 of the bylaw that's been provided to us as part of this referral. So, you know, the more we discuss this, the more concerning it becomes, unfortunately, is that the impacts could be far greater outside of the airport lands themselves than in the larger area that's contemplated in the bylaw. That if complementary and density of uses is included within that RGS amendment, including the potential expansion area, just looking at the map here, there's several times the land area outside of the Nanaimo airport lands than within, contained within this amendment. So, and I don't want to sort of hit on the Ladysmith thing. I think I can do that with our CAO and our council, and we will be following up with that at our next meeting. But it just stands to recognize that it's really surprising to me in 2021 that the conversation goes back to legislation, and that a community under legislation 51.6 kilometers away from the epicenter of the impacts is prioritized regardless of what legislation says over those all wholly contained within 50 kilometers, which would go all the way past Cobble Hill, close to the Shawnigan Lake Village core. And yet there was no meaningful and deep engagement with the communities that would be arguably more affected than those in Parksville and Lanceville included. So at this time, I don't think I can support this. I think that the answers around the questions about the impacts of this kind of potential development, airports do attract a density of development, both industrial and commercial. And if we look in the future, as we all should be doing in today, when we're planning for 2050 and net zero, it just seems like this is not fully considered and fully consulted. So I can't support it at this time either.
Thank you, Director Smith.
Thank you. I, as Area G, who is the best part of the filling in the CVRD between Ladysmith and North Cowichan, you know, we also would like to have some consultation in this process as a community. We're approximately 12.6 kilometers from the Nanaimo airport. And I think it's really important, even though we may be a smaller community, we're impacted by the airport and the traffic and the many things that happen at the airport, especially looking like Director Stone indicated, at the bottom of airplanes as they fly over us, and the flying school planes that do their stalls above us. I think those are all important areas that we should also be consulted, and I know that we're under the CVRD, and as Area H is also under the CVRD, and we sit at this table all together, and I can't support this at this time. I think there is definitely more consultation required. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Smith. Okay, so I think we're at the end of the speakers list. So we do not have a motion on the floor, and it sounds like maybe we're not ready to move forward. I see Mr. Tippett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had a suggestion that the committee might wish to have staff write another report, not specific to this particular referral, but just rather on the regional growth strategy acceptance process, and in the event that acceptance isn't given by the CVRD, what it actually means in terms of further process. We were fortunate in having a staff member, Coralie Breen, who worked for North Saanich and was involved in a situation very much like this while working there. And so we could compose a report that sort of describes the technical steps just for your consideration and your further deliberations on this point for possibly your next meeting. You meet once a month, don't you, the committee?
Once a month.
Oh, okay. Well, we could try to make it for the next meeting. We'll do it as quickly as possible if you think it would be helpful. I'm just offering that as an opportunity.
So, Director Stone.
Yeah, I would be prepared to make that as a motion that that be brought back to the next regional services, and also subsequent to that, I would make a referral motion for the recommendation that's here to follow that report. That gives more time also for the subsequent meetings to happen and for the municipalities that are affected and haven't been consulted to make their concerns known to the RDN and the Nanaimo Airport. So I would move the request that staff provide this report to the next Regional Services Committee meeting.
Okay, seconded by Director Sebring. Any discussion? Director Nicholson.
Okay, I'd like some clarification, because I would have liked to make sure that we're referring this back to staff to work with the RDN to make sure the good consultation happens. So is that what this will, these motions will that happen?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, if I may, that would be a subsequent motion.
Okay, so yours, it's a simple referral motion to staff right now that was moved and seconded. Sorry, you're shaking your head, Director Stone.
Point of clarification, if I may. I believe this was a motion to have staff prepare the report on the resolution process should the support not be forthcoming from the CVRD. And then subsequent to this motion, I would make a further motion to refer, much like Director Nicholson had said, or Director Nicholson can make that motion. But we do have a motion on the floor as per Mr. Tippett's comments regarding staff providing a report on the resolution process should this support not be forthcoming from the CVRD.
Okay. Ms. Legault, is that clear to you? Yes. Okay, so we can vote on the first one. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, so Director Stone, you had a second motion?
Well, much like Director Nicholson said, I would move that this be referred to the next regional services meeting with direction to staff to engage the regional district of Nanaimo on further consultation with affected communities within this CVRD.
Seconded, Director Nicholson. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. So thank you to our guests as well. Productive session. So we are at almost noon and we have several further items and we're due for a recess. What's the pleasure of the committee? We have a 1:30 board meeting. We also have a closed, which would follow, scheduled for noon, but would I assume would follow when we finally get to the end of this agenda. So
Mr. Chair, I could suggest that we go until 12:30 and then break for lunch. We're going to have to come back to this by the looks of things.
Is everyone okay with carrying on till 12:30? Okay. So next item, Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item R2, report from Economic Development Division, Rural Business and Community Recovery Program Funding Opportunity. Proposed recommendation is that it be recommended to the board that a grant application up to a maximum of $70,000 be submitted to the Island Coastal Economic Trust's Rural Business and Community Recovery Program.
Thank you. I see movers and seconders, and I see Mr. O'Riordan is on the screen. Do you have comments or just for questions?
If it pleases the board, I can just introduce it. So thank you, Mr. Chair, and good day, everyone. As you can see in the report, the Island Coastal Economic Trust has launched a rural business and community recovery program, which will provide funding for the creation of a new temporary term positions that strengthen business and community economic recovery and resilience. So Economic Development Cowichan is seeking approval to move forward with the grant application to this program. And these funds would be used to hire an economic development analyst whose primary duties would be to assist sub-regional groups promote economic vitality, recovery, and resilience. So the focus of that temporary staff person, would be around vitality of downtown cores, villages, given their key place in the regional vitality. So should the funds be awarded, funding would support hiring a part-time economic development analyst for up to 18 months. And since the program does not cover benefits or overheads, a transfer from operating reserves of $25,600 would be needed to finance the costs. And the operating reserve is currently standing at $277,844. So that's just a quick summary of the opportunity, and back for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Stone.
I'm just questioning why we'd be providing additional funds for benefits when we're talking about contract positions. Typically, when we've done grant programs like this in the past, we hire a consultant through a contract, and therefore no benefits or additional remuneration is required outside of the contract.
Yeah, under this program, contract work is not acceptable. It has to be new term positions.
Thank you. Director Nicholson?
Thank you. So I am wondering, I think this is a great opportunity, but I am wondering what the level of need is in our region from your perspective, Mr. O'Riordan. And I am wondering how we're going to set priorities, because I know we discussed the Cowichan Business Area Park and the potential disposition of the old Cowichan Elementary School. And we talked about probably the need to do a neighborhood plan for that area because of its complicated nature and the need to make it more modern. So I am wondering, where that would stand in a list of all the things that we need to do in the region.
This funding is pretty broad in nature, but it has to be activities focused on economic recovery. Even before COVID-19, rural communities, so communities that have done design charrettes or have engaged in sub-regional economic development strategies, have been looking for additional support to implement those strategies, and communities have found it difficult to do these by themselves. So this would basically provide a little bit of extra help over a longer period to help build the capacity of those communities to implement the existing plans that they have, but also communities that haven't got those strategies in place to support them where they really need to have resilience. And that's the primary focus in this point would be around community cores like villages and town cores, because that's going to be a key point for resilience and recovery for the region. And it's going to impact all different areas in terms of tourism, employment, livability, even sprawl. So that's our proposed focus on this.
Thank you, Mr. O'Riordan. Is that a follow-up, Director Nicholson?
Yes, I understand that that would be the focus, but I'm trying to get my head around what the actual need is and how much of a dent this grant would actually make and what we think we need to do.
Well, for now, we have the board has approved the corporate strategic plan, which looks to act on the needs identified in the design charrettes, etc. And in some cases, there has been some movement on this, but in a lot of cases, the simple process of bringing people together for a meeting and coordinating those meetings and creating minutes and action items coming out of those meetings is the point of leverage to move them forward. So this application would be to have a part-time person, so it's 70.5 hours a week over a longer period. The need in the region probably could have a full-time person doing this, to be honest, but this is a starting point, and it would be to build that engagement within communities who are motivated to move forward with these. But I think the need is certainly there. I've heard it from directors, from community members, from business organizations throughout the region in terms of that need for supports in getting projects going. And it also aligns with what funding is coming through recovery. So the more organized communities can be around developing projects to get them shovel ready, aligns them with being able to move forward with funding applications to support recovery. So that's kind of where it fits. I see a definite need there. I'm sure others can speak to that, but that's what I have for you. Thank you.
Thank you. So I have Director Marsh and then Stone.
Yeah, just to say that grant funding won't fund, it says medical, dental, pension, or other non-statutory costs. I'm wondering if this could it be used for, and it's certainly not up to me to decide that, but would it be possibly seed money or that could be used for our own regional growth strategy?
That it needs to be activities directly related to recovery. So the way I framed it is that it's supporting as many communities as possible, giving opportunities to do that with direct projects that are already through some sort of phase of development, so that it can build existing projects and then leverage them to access increased funding. But starting from scratch, I think would be a harder sell in terms of getting this funding. And it's a really competitive process.
And it's
so this is the application that I feel is the best fit in terms of longevity and approach and having balance for the region.
Right. So it's mostly meant for electoral areas then, right?
Within the funding, they have excluded populations over 25,000. So technically, North Cowichan would not be included if they were the sole applicant. However, if Economic Development Cowichan does apply, then working with communities like Chemainus and Crofton on an individual level wouldn't be excluded from supports.
Right, because we do contribute to Function 121, I understand. So
yes.
Yeah, great. Yeah. Thanks very much, Mr. Reardon.
Thank you.
And by the way, that was a great Facebook post you did recently.
Thank you. So we have Director Stone and then Smith.
Yeah, just for clarity, this is a new provincial program administered by staff at ICE-T, but not your typical ICE-T program. So this is a provincially provided. So the parameters are provided by the province of BC under this rural business recovery program. However, this is also an opportunity to leverage other funding through other programs that are offered not only by ICE-T, but other recovery programs. So for example, using a design charrette as an example, there's actionable items out of there. You get the support resources from this grant. You can develop a fundable strategy implementation step, for example, and then apply for the actual capital works funding and things that may be required. So thinking of things like Think Shawnigan or the Cowichan Bay charrettes, if there's actionable short-term items that are going to help benefit your community and the economy, this is helping provide that pathway from where you are to those capital projects becoming a reality. So although this is an ICE-T application, it's a provincial program, and there'll be further opportunities to leverage other granting resources to actually build some of the bigger economic development projects that will flow out of it.
Thank you. Director Smith.
Thank you for that clarification, Director Stone. I'm just wondering, with the charrettes, will they require to break down their projects to work within this funding opportunity to prioritize some of those things that came out of the charrettes? I think the charrettes have been done for Yubo, Cobble Hill, Area D, and Area B. Is that correct?
There's design charrettes for Cobble Hill, Cowichan Bay, Shawnigan, and the City of Duncan has a city repair project, and North Cowichan has a economic development strategy. So the staff person would intend it to bring those groups together. So these charrettes were built around stakeholders, so nonprofits, elected representatives, community leaders, and this person would be to bring those people together to look at those charrettes and look in the context of COVID-19 and go, okay, what are our priorities? What's the best win for this community? And then to collectively work on a specific project, for example. And if those communities, for example, do not want to do any of those things, then maybe it's something else. And it's also open to communities if they don't have design charrette, but they're really motivated and they're heavily impacted by COVID. For example, Chemainus might be an example because they were heavily reliant on international tourism, and they've said, we need more help, please. Then this could be an opportunity to bring a group together in Chemainus to look at, okay, what can we do to revitalize Chemainus, to diversify the economy, etc.
Follow-up, Director Smith.
So I have a question. In Saltaire, we're very limited in the commercial that we have, but the coffee shop was extremely impacted in that area there. And we don't have a charrette yet. Economically, the impact was huge for both the gelato and the coffee shop. And I'm just wondering if there's something within this package that would be also, there isn't the tourists stopping by, there's not the local, there was a lot of things that went on. And I'm just wondering how that type of situation would fit in.
Joe Written.
Yeah, I think once this person was hired, I think we would look to engage with directors to see, what is the biggest impact, what is the greatest fit for where they can fit within this process. I think, in your case, it may be that if there's a group looking at Chemainus, then that may also fit that you sit on that group as well. So, the format is fluid at this point. So I think we'd have to feel that out, what would be the right fit and use of resources. If everyone came forward and said, well, I need help too, I need help too, I need help too, then we will have to spread that person based on those needs and assign resources based on capacity. That'd be most effective for the whole region and looking at impacts as they arise within communities.
Okay, thank you very much. So seeing no further questions, the recommendation has been moved and seconded. I'd like to call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next item, Ms. Legault.
Mr. Chair, item R4, report from the Finance Division on Cowichan Housing Association rental housing capital contribution. And the staff recommendation is that it be recommended to the board, one, that $175,000 be allocated from the CVRD Housing Trust Fund for the proposed Cowichan Lake Elder Care Society development, Lakewood Manor, on Renfrew Avenue in the town of Lake Cowichan. Two, that the 2021 budget for Function 498 be amended to A, increase grant to organization by $175,000, and B, decrease transfer to housing fund by $175,000.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I will have to declare a potential conflict as I am a director on the Cowichan Lake Elder Care Society, and if I could be placed on the lobby for that discussion, I would appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. McGonigal.
That's done.
So, Director Smith, were you moving that? Okay, and second, Director Stone? Okay. So any discussion? I see we have Mr. Weiner with us. No?
I'm just here to answer any questions.
Okay, looks like we've got a moving right along. So we've had it moved and seconded. I'd like to call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. So next item, Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. R5, report from Recycling and Waste Management Division on the renewal of a municipal type service agreement with Penelica Tribe for solid waste disposal. Staff recommendation is that it be recommended to the board that a 5-year, 21 to 2026 municipal type service agreement with Penelica Tribe for solid waste disposal be approved.
Okay, moved and seconded, and I see we have Mr. Hitami here. Okay, for questions. Same as last time, no questions? Perfect. I'd like to call the question then. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Next item, Ms. Legault.
Item R6, report from Parks and Trails Division regarding the Sidhu Regional Park Site Management Plan in Electoral Area B, Shawnigan Lake, and the staff recommendation is that the Regional Park Site Management Plan be approved.
Director Nicholson, seconded. And any discussion? Director Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question through to staff. I believe in reading through the report that there was an indication that while we have a management plan, that this asset isn't generally to be considered or developed as a often visited and featured park in our system of regional parks, that we're in a sense not discouraging but not encouraging significant traffic through that area. Would that be a fair assessment of what I read today or read yesterday?
Mr. Chair, through to Director Morrison, that's absolutely correct. There's no built infrastructure, no plans for trails or anything else out there. It's really just an in situ regional park.
Thank you. Other questions? Director Martman?
So given that, would it be appropriate to talk a little bit about what's the cost of maintaining a park in this, like this?
Mr. Chair, there's really no sort of annual operating costs as noted in the report. The two conservancy groups will be out there doing annual inspections as part of their due diligence per the covenants register. The only chance we may be out there is if somebody's dumped a bit of garbage or there's a bit of a tree issue. But other than that, we see the annual cost being minimal in terms of managing this park.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, seeing no further questions, I'd like to call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And next item, Ms. Legault.
Mr. Chair, then we're down to new business, and I understand I received a message from Director Nicholson indicating that the item she had brought forward for new business was actually intended for open session and not closed session. So wondering about the committee's indulgence about changing that?
So Director Nicholson, I have not seen, has that been something in writing that you have? Would you like to speak to that?
Yes, Ms. Legault and you also on your email have a copy of a motion I'd like to make. So there is a property for sale on the Cowichan River, and I would move that the board send a letter to the Minister of Environment requesting that BC Parks acquire Section 6 River Bottom Road, PID 009-850554, as an important addition to the role of the Cowichan River Provincial Park in protecting the natural, cultural, and outdoor recreation values of the scenic and world-renowned salmon-bearing river.
So you're moving that, seconded by Director Marsh. Any discussion? Questions? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Director Nicholson.
And may I request that this be put on the board agenda today?
Ms. Legault, is that possible?
It's a very tight turnaround, but if that's the committee's wish.
Nodding. Okay.
Thank you.
Director Morrison.
Could I ask that there be some information provided to directors before this comes to the board? This I had no information in advance of this meeting, and I would have assumed that this would have been ruled to be a notice of motion, but given the time sensitivity, maybe that wasn't possible. But I'd like to have some background on information that I'm voting on, if I could, please, before the board meeting.
Director Nicholson, is that possible?
Yes, maybe if Mr. Farquhar is there, he would have the listing and could send it around. Was that possible, Mr. Farquhar? If you're
Mr. Chair, we can endeavor to send out to all the directors information about the location of the property relative to the provincial park. Yes.
Yeah. No, I apologize because this was just brought to my attention yesterday. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director Nicholson.
And Mr. Chair, I had a question. You did.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see you.
Me. I guess I was just wondering, maybe we could discuss this then at the board, but I'm wondering if we're writing a letter like this, does that commit us to being part of the purchase or, so I'm just not aware of any of that.
Mr. Farquhar?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If this is supported by the board, it would just be a letter sent off to the minister, but there would be no obligations on behalf of the regional district in terms of it's an advocacy letter for them to pursue acquisition of this property as part of the provincial park.
Thank you. That's fine, Director Acton. Yeah, Director Toporowski.
Thank you, Chair. This similar conversation is going to be going before the treaty this Friday at Cowichan Tribe. So I think maybe a letter will be going forward from us as well. I'm not sure what the decision is going to be made there, but it will be a discussion at our table too.
Good to know. Thank you. And Director Marsh?
I was just going to say that would be really awesome if there was a partnership there. Yeah, thanks for sharing that with us.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so we are now, Ms. Legault, next item.
That would bring us to question period.
Okay, so let's take our 10-minute break and come back for question period. 12:30. Thanks, everyone.
cameras live.
Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. So, Ms. Legault, do we have any submissions for question period?
We have no participants for question period today.
Okay, thank you. So next item is closed. Now, there was suggestion, Ms. Legault, that we refer our closed regional services to our closed board. That see Director Morrison's moving that.
Actually, what I was going to recommend is we resolve into close, adopt the minutes, and then in close, move that they be referred to this afternoon's board meeting.
So do that in closed, okay. So procedurally, Ms. Legault, do we have to log out and log back in?
Sorry, in the interest of time, I think we can just stay in this meeting. Just when we are, when the motion is made to close the session, then we will just turn the cameras off. So you'll just want to give us a minute to make sure that the camera is completed.
Okay, someone like to make that motion? Director Sebring, second by Director Nicholson. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.